super short introduction. Oh, by the way, I think I mentioned this. And there are detailed bios at lasertalks.com with links to the speaker's website. So super short introduction to Anastasia, because she spoke previously at the laser. You can find the previous video on again, lasertalks.com. She's assistant professor in the graphic design department at the Rhode Island School of Design, and she has lectured at several design schools, including Yale, Parsons, Pratt, UCLA, Pomona College, University of Chicago. Again, detailed bio at lasertalks.com with a link to her very interesting website. Okay, ready to go?
Yes, thank you, Pero, and thank you so much for inviting me again to give a talk about my work. Last time we came here with the project on microbial cosmologies, where we were exploring mobility in the post-pandemic world, and we were specifically talking about a microbe-centric world, and you can find the recording of the talk on YouTube. So as Spiro mentioned, I'm Anastasia Raina. I'm a Ukrainian-born designer, researcher, and an assistant professor at Rhode Island School of Design. And I'm interested in exploring the aesthetics of technologically mediated natures through machine vision, evolutionary biology, and incorporating biotechnology into artistic vernacular. So the title of my talk, Posthuman Polymythology, also happens to be the title of the book that I will be talking about today. And the book is an anthology of essays and visual work that I had created beginning 2015 up until now. It continues up until this moment. It's a collection of essays and visual work looking at the body, a human body, as the subject matter of design. The book reimagines what constitutes design today and explores what lies beyond materiality of objects and makes biotechnological matter of chemicals and encoded genetic information yet another medium of design vocabulary. It addresses issues of commodification of gender, ethnicity, sexuality, and race, spanning across spectrum of contemporary concerns, from posthuman warfare, where I explored the business of war accompanied by rapid technological advances that had resulted in ever new ways of probing the depth of our inhumanity. Keyboard cowboys operate remote control weaponry and create heaps of disposable, humiliated, and dismembered bodies in faraway lands. To the success of contemporary biotechnologies that have transformed and dramatically redesigned our bodies. Our fertility has been transformed by the pill. Masculinity and femininity sometimes seem reducible to hormonal interventions. Delayed childbearing becomes possible by egg freezing, and human consciousness has become less mysterious thanks to neuroscience and neuroimaging. Surgery gives a new form to our genetically predetermined original, and now DNA can be altered to prevent inherited diseases. Further continuing to explore digital technologies that provide a platform for the peculiar social processes of techno-self-composition, I outline a skeletal structure that emerged de novo from its progenitors, composing a narrative of becoming the other. And moving on to the molecular body as a way to address inherent structures of oppression on atomic level. This project in particular, I attempt to make biological processes and their technological outcome more visible by using short tandem repeat STR analysis, a tool which is used in forensics that evaluates specific STR regions found in genomic DNA. I translate 13 loci into 2D grid of hypothetical agarose DNA electrophoresis gels. And by connecting the DNA bands on the gel with straight line segments, I'm able to create the distinct 2D shape that I subsequently transform into a 3D structure by rotating around its horizontal gel axes. The 3D shape thus generated serves as a unique formal fingerprint for the person whose DNA was used in the STR analysis. From a DNA sequence into points of vectors, one biological information unit transmogrified into yet another unit of code, transforming human beings into packets of information, making us completely instrumental, whether to corporate power or to the repressive state apparatus. As life becomes a mere manifestation of code, data, the informational code of life becomes the ultimate commodity. To know this code is to understand life. Biological sciences are filled with language metaphors. Scientists use words such as code, transcription, translation to describe the actions of DNA and RNA in the cell. Robert Sinheimer authored the Book of Life, in which he linked the genetic code to ancient Mayan codex, and biologist Irvin Chargaff described chromosomes as the grammar of the body, forming the instructions of our genetic makeup. Linguistic metaphors imply that the cell has a vocabulary of code, words in which it constructs and receives messages. I took this moment as an opportunity to design my own DNA writing system by assigning ambiguous characters to complementary bases. It is possible to complement DNA sequences by simply rotating the string symmetrically by 180 degrees, and the DNA script characters are oriented above and below the baseline, depending on whether the corresponding bases are pyrimidines or purines. Motivated by the research of potential uses of DNA as a replicable medium to store huge amounts of data in a single cell and potentially become a repository of human knowledge, it is known that entire world's information can be stored in 1 kilogram of DNA. My book, Posthuman Polymythology, took me to biogenetics lab. I extracted 4 essential DNA nucleobases, A, T, C, and G, from each chapter of the book, and each DNA string was subsequently manufactured at the oligonucleotide synthesis facility. The DNA samples were then subjected to an electrophoresis of agarose gel and visualized under UV light. In doing this, I created a set of genetic genes representative of each chapter in the text. But why would a designer, graphic designer, bother doing all of this? Since its invention, the book as a format has been static. But my experience of creating the book was entirely different. It is often unruly, constantly shifting and evolving based on its content, only to be imprinted on the page with all of its quirks and imperfections when the deadline strikes. By creating a synthetic DNA string from the text of my book, I was interested in developing a transgenic organism that would express the code of my book, thus reimagining it as a continuously evolving being rather than its conventional static format. Design, as we know it, is founded on the understanding of the human as a discrete individual subject. However, a modern understanding of biology and our relationship with advanced technology, along with the recognition of historical injustices that have marginalized voices of many, are beginning to call into question the certainty of and centrality of human beings, and is traditionally understood in the natural order. Instead of the classical monomyth, the story of one, posthuman polymythology welcomes the narrative of a wide range of biological, artificial, and hybrid subjects into the field of design, illuminating dependencies, entanglements, and relationships that make up our world. Design in the posthuman age is another way that I invite others to participate in this narrative with me. It will be my 4th year at RISD teaching this course, and it functions as a visual research lab, a space for conceptualizing and synthesizing multidisciplinary knowledge and formal experimentation. In this class, we directly engage with the RISD Nature Lab. This allows us as designers to gain and understand the scientific approaches and tools that probe the questions of what it means to be human today. The work is guided by conceptual framework of topics that incorporate ideas from posthumanism, transhumanism, object-oriented ontology, non-human perspectives, design, fiction, and emerging technologies such as gene editing, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and cryptocurrency. The structure allows students to work on subject matter relevant to their interests and take an active part in participating in creating elements of the world that they find themselves more and more entangled in, even those that may lie outside of the confines of traditional design. In addition to teaching, I also try to bring my knowledge into corporate world, and I've been fortunate enough to bring all of these rather crazy ideas to Hyundai, and they've been really open about listening and hopefully implementing some of them in their work. It's been already our third time since spring 2020, where I led 3 research groups as part of the new collaboration between Rhode and Hyundai, where we're asked to draw inspiration from nature in order to imagine the future of mobility, sustainable cities, and as one of the projects that I'll show you, circular economies. Among its many consequences, COVID-19 pandemic has exposed serious challenges related to mobility and economy, and our innate desire to move freely through space. And my research group focused on questions, on one of the questions, how people will travel through cities across national borders. That was the project Microbial Cosmologies that we already presented with Piero before. Another project from noise to form explores ways that we can be inspired by artificial landscapes and natures. And last project that we just finished, or perhaps one of the first phases were completed last week, was specifically focusing on viable futures. And this project is especially exciting because it's one of the first projects where we are exploring collaborative models that bring scientists, designers, local farmers to create models of resilient aquacultures and explore biomaterial production as one of the topics. With rising seawater temperatures and ocean acidification, which will lead to extinction of many species both on land and sea, sea urchin is emerging as one of the most innovative and sustainable organisms of the future due to its water temperature resilience. In our collaborative research, we're exploring models for Rhode Island's climate resilience, aquacultures, and biomaterial production by introducing sea urchin waste as valuable material that can be utilized in arts, construction, and medical field. On the left here, you see Colleen Suckling, who is a URI biologist, and we've been working very closely with her in this project. And Jordan Kramer, who is a farmer from Maine and one of the very few farmers in on the East Coast who is engaging in urchin farming. So urchin shells consist of magnesium-rich calcium carbonate, which is a valuable biomaterial that can be used in medical, design, and construction industries. And we're throughout our 6 weeks research, we were focusing on ways that it can be implemented in artistic practice. So here are some of the examples of tiles with ground sea urchin shell, which is utilized as ceramic glaze and clay mixes. So each tile represents individual recipes based on the chemistry of calcium carbonate and its properties in ceramic glazes that varied in its ductility and glossiness. And through a series of experimentation, we also developed a proprietary dye extraction process that separated urchin pigment from urchin shell, resulting in a palette of water-soluble colorants that range from pinks and blues and purples. So urchin-based biomaterials create both ecological and economic benefits to local aquacultures and local economies, and emerge as an alternative to mining and textile dyeing processes that contribute to loss of biodiversity, contamination of soil and water, and enormous amount of pollution. Developing this new biomaterial allowed us to imagine a circular material cycle that utilizes the waste of the urchin seafood industry, urchin shells and spines for creating new applications and products. Here's Econo dye, an extracted dye from urchin spines. Spines specifically are the areas where the most pigment is concentrated in. And we have been successful at dyeing silks and linens and cottons, and the colors are absolutely beautiful. And here we have Econo Clay, which is based on sea urchin shell powder. and it can be used to create a variety of ceramics and sculptural objects, and Econo Glaze, which is a ground urchin powder, which is used in ceramic glazing and can serve as a dolomite replacement. So dolomite, for those who don't know, is a material, is a mineral that is being mined. So urchin happens to be a replacement for dolomite. We employed a 3D ceramic printer and tested the applications of our newly developed biomaterials and fabrication processes, and designs of each object is based on the atomic structure of the sea urchin, of sea urchin's shell and its nano architecture. So over the next year, we will build a community engagement infrastructure by engaging in dialogue with local urchin farmers, scientists, designers, policymakers, local regulatory organizations, and community members to permit urchin production in Rhode Island waters. Surprisingly, urchin farming is not something that is permitted in Rhode Island. So this project will serve as a way to engage everybody in this research, and it will serve as a framework for our third and culminating phase of the project, which is an immersive dining experience done in collaboration with local restaurants and urchin farmers. Finally, I want to leave you with this thought: developments in biotechnology, gene editing offer a rich critical field for artists to anticipate and illuminate the consequences of rapidly transforming bioethics. Numerous ethical questions arise from our newly developed ability to design and manipulate life, redefining the concept of evolution and shaping ecosystems by the introduction of new and modified versions of ourselves and other organisms. Are they human? Will we remain human? Becoming such transcendental designers doesn't just put us on an uncomfortable equal footing with other inferior life forms like plants and animals. It makes us confront the possibility that our reducibility into code makes us equal with chimerical and artificial forms of life that haven't even earned the right to exist. It makes us insignificant bits of carbon, a bunch of agglomerated polymers endowed with the ability to replicate. And the challenge is to remain human, whatever that means under these circumstances. Thank you.
I was talking, but I forgot to unmute myself. Okay, thank you very much. As you know, I think highly of your projects. I wish Stanford would offer you a position here, so I could I could play with them in person. My question is about the audience. See, these are fascinating projects. How can you, do you have some way to expand the audience beyond your students? You know, a painter, you know, has an art gallery, sometimes a museum where, you know, the painting is there and hundreds of people can go and check it out. I assume your projects are a little more difficult to consume.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we have been thinking about, or I've been thinking about in the past year or so when we started working with Hyundai, because it became really clear that academic jargon doesn't translate very well, especially in a different language. So all of a sudden we had to pivot and think about other ways of, for example, translating post-anthropocentric into biocentric design, and introducing these ideas of moving from human-centeredness into design that is centering nature. So there's definitely things that I have been thinking about, and I think this third project kind of has all of these different phases of academic research, also material, biomaterial research, and a third phase where we're bringing people and urchin farmers, and we're speaking to probably those, to the audience that doesn't have any idea about that perhaps like we might not even have seafood in the next few years. I know someone is saying in the chat that on the West Coast, the sea urchin population is exploding. On the East Coast, it has been actually overfished. So we have quite the opposite problem, but the solution is the same, is to consume more sea urchin or farm more sea urchin on the East Coast. So I think that's definitely, we're kind of moving into space where we're creating different levels of engagement. And the most important level of engagement that I found throughout my career is aesthetically pleasing work that will guide the viewer to perhaps dive deeper into the project. So, and have all of those levels of engagement built into work, depending on the amount of effort somebody wants to put into learning more about it. So that's audience, and thinking about audience is definitely part of of the project.
Okay, if you go under the chat, there's a comment by Warren and one by Peggy. And
Yes.
if you don't,
I saw Warren.
Otherwise,
I saw Warren's comment about the sea urchin population exploding on the West Coast. As I mentioned, are you designing harvesting methods? Well, we're not designing harvesting methods, but we're rather thinking about how they can be, how the urchin byproduct can be utilized as, or waste can be utilized as a biomaterial, and can also tell a story. So definitely the harvesting methods would be left to farmers who we're engaging with, and to scientists who are developing the entire process of farming. So farming is really difficult and costs a lot of money. So there are only 3 urchin farmers in Maine. There are no urchin farmers in Rhode Island. So it's definitely an area for exploration for the next few years for us. And Peggy, amazing talk. I would love to hear more about the economics of sea urchin, how expensive, oh, okay. Cheap it is to make those dyes. Why does Rhode Island prohibit sea urchin farming? Are they plentiful? Okay. Thanks, Peggy, for your question. Well, at this moment, making sea urchin dye is quite expensive, but we are hoping to work closely with distributors and utilize their byproduct instead of buying the urchin spines and urchin shells ourselves and grinding them by hand. So there is definitely needs some optimization that needs to happen. So moving from the kitchen into something that can be applied across different projects or larger projects. In terms of economics of sea urchin, it is rather expensive to purchase the sea urchin egg. So for example, if an oyster is, I believe Jordan mentioned, is 1/600th of a cent, sea urchin is 30 cents per egg, and it's not certain if it's going to survive. So scientists are doing a lot of work into ensuring that farmers have viable eggs to grow. Also, it takes about 3 years to grow from a juvenile sea urchin that you saw in the beginning of the presentation into an actual sea urchin that can be eaten. Are they plentiful? No, they're not. They have been overfarmed in the 90s, and there are some divers have been diving in Rhode Island and on the East Coast in order to harvest sea urchins themselves. Otter is a very good sea urchin harvest. Yeah, I mean, maybe we will look into some interspecies collaboration of employing otters to harvest sea urchins. Good idea.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.